thank you, Sandy,
Oh, you're welcome.
for
Thank you.
inviting me.
I'm giving you a pen.
Thank you all for being here today, and I'm just so grateful to the Pine Bush Library System for inviting me here, and I'm so glad that those of you who are here found out about it and showed up today. So my name is Donna Davies. I'm a care consultant. I'm a social worker. My title is Care Consultant, Senior Director of Programs and Services for the Hudson Valley chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. I've been working with the association for 16 years, and I cover Orange and Sullivan counties, along with several other coworkers who are on that team covering those counties. And one of the things we do is teach education programs out in the community, and we do it a lot virtually now too. We've been doing virtual programs since COVID started on Zoom, and we'll continue to do that to some extent because some people like Zoom programs because they have a hard time leaving the house, especially as a caregiver. But we started returning to in-person programs on April 1st. And we returned last year, then we had to take a break when the numbers came up again in December, and we're back in person now. So I'm so thankful to be here with all of you. Today's program is called the 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's. We have another dozen or so education programs similar to this, each with a little bit of a different focus. And just so that you know, I put some literature on the back table. And if you go to our website, you can see the calendar of events is extensive. And these programs are available not only in person and virtually through our chapter, but you can actually watch them on our website, alz.org, 24/7. They're available on our website, done by our home office. So you have access to so many different education programs. And I'm actually coming back in 2 weeks and doing another program, and I don't have my flyer, but I think it's Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body, which is coming 2 weeks from today, is about trying to reduce your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia as we age. So, if you're able to come back to that one, that has a whole different focus that'll take another hour. But today we'll talk about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. And this program is really designed for anybody, from somebody just curious, like what is Alzheimer's? What is dementia? What is that? And what should I know about it? To somebody who thinks they have the symptoms themselves and are interested in learning more about it. To somebody who's a caregiver and is maybe caring for someone who has Alzheimer's but doesn't know a lot about it. We don't get a whole lot of education necessarily from our doctors, although they're prescribing meds and they're providing treatment. Sometimes you want to know more and dig in deeper about the illnesses and what they really mean. So this presentation has a number of videos, and so I'll be clicking as we go through on videos of different experts and people with dementia talking about their, what they know about this illness and what their experiences are, just to share that expertise with us. That way it's not just me. And also, actually, let me get on here with the mouse. There we go. Let's hope I got all this. Every computer is different. But this is great. It's working great, Sandy.
Good.
So the objectives are, we'll talk about what is typical age-related memory loss, changes in thinking, memory, and behavior. And then we'll talk about what are the possible warning signs of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. We'll talk about how to approach someone if you have concerns about their memory. And we'll talk about the benefits of early detection. It is something that is a lengthy illness, Alzheimer's disease, and many people are not even diagnosed until well into the middle stage. So having that diagnosis early does have some benefits, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the tests and the diagnostic process of how to find out what's going on when you do have symptoms. and then I'll wrap it up with some information about the resources that the Alzheimer's Association offers and how we can help you in the community. Okay, so there's a family, a fictitious family named the Garcias, and we're going to follow them through this. And the Garcias are a family of a mother who is suspected to have symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, and her two daughters who are going to work together to support their mom and help her figure out what's going on with her. And for those of you who text on your phone, you'll see lots of text messages coming up on this program because the daughters are talking to each other and trying to figure out what to do and how to solve the problem that they have. So this is Mary. Mary is a 73-year-old widow who lives alone. She's a retired teacher. She's always meticulously cared for her home. Her daughter has been noticing that her laundry's piling up. There's junk mail, there's old newspapers lying around the house. So she has some concerns about what that would mean since it's a change in her mother's behavior. The daughter on the left is Lydia. She lives close by, and she visits her mother frequently. And the daughter on the right is Patricia, who lives in another state. She works long hours. She isn't able to visit her mother as often as she'd like, but she and Lydia communicate frequently, especially via text message, to share about their mother and figure out what to do. Here's their first text message. You know that sound. Worried about mom. She keeps losing things and the house is a mess. Probably normal to get a little forgetful with age. It's so unlike her. Should we worry? Let's reach out to our old neighbor, Dr. Salloway. And Dr. Salloway, by the way, is actually a real MD. So there is a specialist here. He's an expert in aging and in the field of dementia. So he was pulled in for this video to answer some of these questions.
As we get older, cognitive problems become more noticeable for almost everybody, and it can vary from person to person. Typically with age, people have trouble coming up with the word they want right when they want it. They have trouble remembering names, and they don't think quite as quickly. What's more concerning, or what might be the beginning of a memory problem, is people have a lot of trouble coming up with words or names, and it's happening more frequently, and the words or names don't necessarily come to them later. And then they start misplacing things, but not just once in a while, because we all misplace things, but more often. And it begins to interfere day to day. That should be a warning sign for people that this might be the beginning of a memory problem.
And you'll hear some of those symptoms are things that you may have experienced. I misplace things, I forget things, right? We all do that. And we do that more and more as we get older because our brain is aging just like the rest of our body is. But we'll talk in this program about how to differentiate between what would be a typical normal age-related change and what could be a sign of a disease process that needs to be treated. So you hear the words dementia and Alzheimer's disease used interchangeably, and they are related, but they're not the same. So we're going to hear some video about the definition of those, and you'll hear me use those words interchangeably at times in my own program because Alzheimer's disease is just one of the many forms of dementia. So we do use those interchangeably at times, but I want to make sure we all are on the same, level field as far as understanding what those words actually mean.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain, or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So that umbrella term is really general. It just describes that, you know, group of symptoms of challenges with memory, language, thinking, behavior, mood. It's kind of that umbrella term. It's like if I said to you, what's your favorite dessert? What's your favorite dessert, Sandy?
Chocolate ice cream.
Ah, that's one of mine too. How about what's your favorite?
I also like ice cream.
All right. Any other favorites?
Strawberry rhubarb pie.
Ooh, this is the time of year for that too. Yes. Any others?
Pound cake with different toppings on it.
Really good chocolate brownies. Really good dark chocolate brownies.
Yes. Oh, now I'm drooling over here under my mask. I'm drooling. That is, yeah, so dessert, the word dessert is like an umbrella. Under that umbrella, you know, dessert kind of means, typically it means something sweet that you eat after a meal. You know, we might be able to kind of put a definition on that. But under that umbrella of dessert are all these different things, chocolate things, pound cake things, strawberry rhubarb, you know, there's a lot of stuff under that umbrella. And that's how we describe the word dementia. And it is important to know that if you have a loved one who got a diagnosis of dementia, you would want to go back to your doctor and say, what's the cause of those symptoms of dementia? Because dementia is not a diagnosis. It is not a disease process. It's just a word to describe a group of symptoms which are caused by something. So that's something that, you know, we're getting there, you know, over time, but we're not quite there yet. We still have a lot of people who come to us with a diagnosis of dementia, and we have to give them the words to use to send back and talk to the doctor.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Aldous Alzheimer's described specific changes in the brain, what we call the formation of plaques and tangles. Now, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and is thought to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull. It is part of the brain most involved in remembering, problem solving, thinking, and even feelings. There are about 100 billion nerve cells or neurons throughout the brain that transmit messages in order for us to create memories, feelings, and thoughts. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to the brain tissue loss, or what we call shrinkage, and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss, problems with thinking, planning, behavioral issues, and even at the end stages, problems with swallowing.
Okay, and now we'll hear from Ruth Drew. Ruth Drew is a specialist in the field of Alzheimer's disease to talk about why it's important to know what those signs are.
It's important to know what the warning signs of Alzheimer's are and to be on the lookout. We know that we change over time, and the warning signs of Alzheimer's can be warning signs of a number of things, but when you see those in yourself or in someone you care about, it's important to check it out, to consult with a doctor, to find out what you're dealing with.
Yes. So the 10 warning signs were developed by the Alzheimer's Association as a system to help us understand the difference between normal aging and what might actually be a symptom of some form of dementia. So the list is a tool, and it doesn't mean that if you have these things that you have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. It just means that these are common examples, the most common examples of symptoms, and that if you did have some of these symptoms, you'd want to go have that checked out by a physician. So let's review. the 10 warning signs. So we'll review each of these warning signs and discuss and give examples of them. So the first one is memory loss that disrupts everyday life. So this is the most common warning sign of Alzheimer's disease, is what's called short-term memory loss. And the key is that it has to impact your daily living. If you forget it, if you're more forgetful as you age, and you forget where your car keys are, where did I put my reading glasses, what did I come to the basement for? These are the things that happen. If it's not impacting your ability to function in your daily life, it may not be a warning sign of a disease. It might just be normal aging. But some of the examples include forgetting important dates or events. So if I just went to a wedding, last weekend, and Sandy said today, Donna, I know you were going to a wedding last weekend. How was it? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't go to a wedding, but it was like 3 days ago. That would be a warning sign of a possible disease causing a change in my brain that's leading me to forget an important event, something big. That might be a warning sign. Asking the same question over and over again. And often this will happen with people with dementia many times. So they might ask 25 times the same question and not just even once more. It's more of a repetitive action because they're just not remembering the answer. Where are we going? You're driving in the car. Where are we going? You're a mile down the road after saying we're going to Hannaford's. Where are we going? I told you we're going to Hannaford's. Another mile down the road. Where are we going? By then, it's frustrating, and for both parties, it's frustrating. So, and then relying on memory aids like lists, like notes. These are things we rely on more and more as we age, but relying on them to the extent, and still having difficulty with all the memory aids, and more that can be a sign for some people. But forgetting names, forgetting appointments sometimes, remembering them later, totally normal aging related memory loss. Okay, the second sign is challenges in planning or solving problems. So a possible sign of dementia would be something like following your favorite recipe that you pull out, regularly, and you can no longer follow the recipe. It's kind of mumbo jumbo to you at that point. If that's something you've done your whole life, now following that set of rules, that set of instructions, planning ahead, planning a vacation. If you've been the vacation planner for the family and now you don't even know where to start, that could be a red flag, possible sign of dementia. Taking a lot longer to complete tasks. A typical age-related change would be making mistakes when you're doing your finances or paying bills. The brain isn't functioning as well as we age, and so you will make more mistakes than you used to, and that's a normal experience. And here's a warning sign for John.
I was probably spending 4 to 5 times more time preparing for something than I did, say, 5 or 10 years ago. Because of I would lose my thought, I'd lose my focus, I'd get anxious, I wouldn't get to sleep. I was thinking of this, I was in my sleep, I was thinking about what I was anxious about, which was what I was trying to remember, which was what I was trying to prepare, which I was trying to do. So it was really a vicious circle of, so I was able to control it a lot, so that people wouldn't see things, and there weren't things to be seen. It's what was disturbing me was what effort I had to put into to do the things I used to do more easily.
And we hear that a lot, the amount of time, people taking an hour to write an email that used to take them 5 minutes. That's a warning sign for people who are experiencing that. Okay. The third sign is difficulty completing familiar tasks, and that might be something like driving to a familiar location. So wandering, which is getting lost in familiar places, is a sign of, is a warning sign and a symptom of Alzheimer's disease. It affects about 60% of all people who have Alzheimer's disease, and it can be life-threatening. And, you know, if someone goes out in the cold, they can develop hypothermia if they're lost and can't find their way back to a familiar place. But driving, you know, where's the grocery store? I go there every day for the last, you know, every week for the last 30 years, and now I can't find it. That might be a red flag. Organizing a grocery list, again, something that we just do routinely, you know, every week or so. If you play, you know, a poker with your friends and now you can't remember the rules of poker, that might be a warning sign. But typical age-related might be needing help using the settings on something like a microwave or recording a show. And I think especially as technology grows so fast, we constantly, like I looked for the remote to turn up the volume, but I found it's similar to my remote, but I would have had to ask you for help if I couldn't figure that out, because there's so many remotes in our lives now, you know, and that some of that is normal age-related change as well. We have to work harder to figure those things out. So we'll hear from an expert about this symptom.
Some people have difficulty with math or with reading in a way that's unusual to them. And once again, this is a change in that person. So for example, we all know somebody who was never able to balance their checkbook, right? So that wouldn't be a warning sign for them. But if somebody who always balanced their checkbook to the penny suddenly was paying bills, the same bill over and over, or not able to balance their finances, well, that would be a sign for them.
Okay, so let's move on to the next warning sign, which is confusion with time or place. This is also called disorientation, not knowing the date, not knowing the time. And a warning sign of that might be not understanding something if it's not happening immediately. And that, you know, if we say next week we're going to go to this event, to this baby shower or something, but someone with dementia might keep getting confused. You said we're going. Why aren't we there? Why aren't we going? That understanding of time is a concept that becomes impaired with many people with dementia. Also forgetting where they are or how they got there. You know, wait, where are we? And that where are we could be the home that someone has lived in for decades, but suddenly everything looks unfamiliar. So that's called disorientation. A typical age-related change would be getting confused about the day of the week. I mean, that happens to us regularly, right? Like, what month is it? What day is it? What's today? What's the date? I don't know. You know, I mean, I have a cell phone. I look at my cell phone, right? We look at our phone, or we'll look for a clock around the room, you know. And especially if your schedule has changed, like if you work part-time, or you are retired or partially retired, or you don't have a day-to-day regular same routine, that can be just a normal, you know, misunderstanding of the day, or not knowing the day, just not needing to know the day as much anymore. But and it can be just an age-related change. But it's not, if it's not affecting your ability to live your everyday life, then it's not likely a warning sign of Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. This one sounds complicated, but it looks like having difficulty with balance. So many people with Alzheimer's disease will start to fall a lot, even early on in this disease. And everyone around them is wondering, like, what's going on? Why are you tripping all the time? What's going on? It's because their brain is not recognizing the distance, the depth, the visual, the spatial relationship between things. And it's easier to trip going up a curb or picking up over a stair when your brain isn't understanding that. Also difficulty with reading. Even for people who were avid readers, understanding the words and picking that up, you know, that's very difficult. I just visited my aunt in Ohio over the weekend, and she has early to the early middle stage of Alzheimer's, I would say. And she has literally, her living room looks like this. She has that many books in her living room, and she was an avid reader, and she worked at a college, and she was reading me things out of the newspaper, and every other word was wrong. It was similar, you know, it sounded kind of similar, but she wasn't pronouncing it right. She wasn't saying it right. And I wasn't even 100% sure whether she was aware of what the word meant. And that's just a huge change for her, that has gotten worse over the last couple years as her Alzheimer's is progressing a little bit. So for her, that was a really pronounced symptom of Alzheimer's disease. And then the third one is judging distance, which I kind of alluded to about like tripping, going up a curb and things like that. Also determining color or contrast. So if there were a black mat here on the floor, but the floor is kind of a light, you know, orange color, someone with dementia might come to that mat and think that it's a hole in the ground, and they would walk around it because they thought they might fall into it. So difficulty seeing that, oh, that's a mat, that's not just a hole in the ground or in the floor. And then typical age-related changes are vision changes related to cataracts. I actually heard this morning in a meeting, someone gave a research update. There was recently a research article about cataracts. People who, a new study just came out like in the last month that people who had their cataracts surgically repaired were 30% less likely to develop Alzheimer's disease in the 10 years following that. And this study is an increasing amount of evidence that we have around vision and hearing changes, and how those are starting to be a more prominent factor in determining whether we will develop Alzheimer's disease. Because when we can't see well, we stop doing things that would stimulate the brain, to doing the Wordle, doing those things we talked about earlier, puzzles and things like that, that stimulate the brain, and the brain needs stimulation. The brain needs activity and challenge and in whatever way that is for each of us. But without that, the brain is more susceptible to deteriorating and developing Alzheimer's. So that was a really interesting new study that just came out. By the way, there's an app. If you use apps on your phone, you can look in the App Store, Alzheimer's Association Science Hub, H-U-B, Science Hub. I have it on my phone, and it gives you the latest, you know, I'd say weekly, there are updates and new articles, new science articles about that. So that's a really helpful one. Okay, the sixth one is new problems with words in speaking and writing. So a sign of that would be stopping in the middle of your conversation. You know, you're at the dinner table, you're talking with someone, and literally it ends abruptly from them, and they can't pick back up. It's not that they just lost their train of thought temporarily, that they lost their train of thought. And that happening more and more could be a warning sign. Repeating themselves, we talked a little bit about that already. Struggling with vocabulary, you know, somebody who, again, this is relative. We all have different vocabularies, but not knowing the words that someone used to use before is a red flag. And trouble naming a familiar object, or using the wrong name, or making one up. That happens sometimes too. But typical age-related is just having trouble finding the right word. We've all been there. It's on the tip of my tongue. I know it's there, and it just isn't coming right away. That's a normal age-related change. So we'll hear about Phil. This is a really interesting story he has.
The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which dealt with words my entire life, you know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
It's just so powerful. You know, when I first saw that video, I thought, oh, did my computer stop or something? But that's his symptom. That's one of his major symptoms. He can't find the words. And as a reporter, imagine how that feels, you know, to somebody experiencing that. Okay, move on to the next sign, which is misplacing things. I know a lot of people worry when they hear this one. But misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace your steps. So if you lose your keys, what do you do? What do you do if you lose your keys?
You retrace your steps.
You retrace, yep. You're going to be like, well, maybe let me look at my purse, you know. Well, they're not there. What else did I do? Well, I have my coat on. Maybe I put them in my coat, you know. And you start to sort of do that retracing. But someone with dementia may not be able to do that retracing at all. So they're just sort of aimlessly looking for the lost item, which again is very frustrating. Also, accusing others of stealing. This can be, it can look like that when actually it's just not being able to find something. So someone is frustrated and angry, so they assume you took it. Or someone took it. Someone came in here and took it, you know, and that can be a very upsetting symptom for many people and their family members, but that could be a symptom of dementia. But it is normal, age-related changes, to misplace things sometimes and have to retrace your steps and look for them again. That's perfectly normal.
My keys are always in the door.
Yes, classic place that you're like, oh yeah, they're out there. Okay. The eighth symptom is decreased or poor judgment. So dealing with money is often where this will show up. Someone who used to be thrifty and now they're spending all of their money, giving it away, ordering things online, money that they don't have necessarily to deal with. It also can look like just messing up the checkbook, you know, not understanding, you know, how to keep that checkbook anymore. And sometimes we can be very vulnerable in this state if we're not understanding money and having poor judgment as well. We can become the victims of all kinds of scams, and older adults are typically targeted heavily with scams and things like that. So this can be really devastating. Another sign of this with poor judgment is not grooming, not staying clean, not knowing how to take care of ourselves anymore. But typical age-related change is sometimes, you know, neglecting, making mistakes sometimes. Oh, I didn't have the oil changed in the car, you know, that sort of thing is a typical age-related change. So we'll hear about Teresa's sign.
The way I count my house, I wouldn't say I was OCD, but pretty close to it. And all of a sudden, everything was okay with me. It's like, oh, it's a pile, I'm tired. So my dining room table usually looked like it was someone's office, because I always would say I would do it tomorrow. And then my bedroom, as far as clothing, I would just put it in a corner, put it in a chair. And all of this is just, I wouldn't say it looked like I was a pet wreck, but really I was, because I never threw anything away. I always would say, I'll get to it, but I never did get to it. So just the way of my standard of living, it was actually decreasing.
And for her, that was a big change, and she noticed that. And she articulates it so well, you know, she's explaining that. We may meet Teresa in the store or something like that, or, you know, we may not notice that, but she noticed it. And for people who probably came to visit her, they probably noticed it as well. So it's really important to hear in an assessment, to hear those stories from the person with dementia and their family members to get a full picture of what the possible symptoms are. Okay, the ninth is social withdrawal from activities, from other people. You know, someone who used to come to the library once a week and have that routine, and they haven't been here for a couple of months, and there's no really other explanation. They weren't in the hospital, like, you know, what's going on? This could be a sign of dementia, that they're withdrawing. And sometimes people withdraw because they're embarrassed about their symptoms, or they're confused in group settings. Multiple people in one room, the stimulation and the noise of that can be upsetting to some people with dementia as well. And so there are many reasons that this might happen, but it is a red flag. It is normal to sometimes just not feel as much like going to those events, not having the energy or the interest anymore. That can be a normal activity. But if this is happening to a significant level, it can be a red flag, possible sign of Alzheimer's disease. And the last one is changes in mood and personality. So someone who, I mentioned like paranoia about stealing money. Stealing money can also be a symptom of paranoia sometimes, and that is a symptom of dementia as well. And it can come across as accusing others or being very afraid, you know, thinking that people are looking in the window at night, or people are in my room, my bedroom. People came in my bedroom last night and I don't know who they were. And maybe the family has video cameras outside the house and they can prove that no one was in their room, but they saw it. They perceived it to be true. That's a hallucination or a delusion. Other changes are, you know, more depression, more anxiety, more anger, you know, tempers flaring, things like that. Age-related changes are typical, you know, maybe more irritation when your routine is disrupted, you know, more frustration with people who are being challenging or difficult in some way. That can be a normal age-related change. But these mood and personality changes for dementia are usually affecting their ability to interact with the people that they care about in their life. And that can really show. Oops, let's go to the next sign. There we go. Okay. So the Garcia family, back to the mother and the sisters. We're going to check in with them, interpreting their mother's signs. So one of the sisters says, "Did you look at the warning signs information that I sent?" "I did, but I still don't know. Mom's showing a couple of signs, but not all the time. How do we know if it's serious enough to see a doctor? Let's ask Dr. Salloway," their old neighbor.
Memory is not all or none, especially when there are early symptoms or signs. So on a good day, people might function very well and not really even, no one notices there's a memory problem. But on other days, especially if they're tired, then things become more noticeable. So memory is variable. It's not all or none. And then there are different type of symptoms that develop for each person. So some people may have trouble with language, may have trouble with organizing themselves, may have trouble navigating while driving, and other people don't have the same symptoms. So you don't have to have every symptom of Alzheimer's to be concerned. And I think the most important thing is determining what has changed from that person's normal level of functioning. And usually people have a pretty keen sense of, you know, what they can normally do well. And then when either they or the family notice that there has been some change from that usual pattern of functioning, that should be a warning sign to people. But they don't have to check up all the boxes.
Right. Sometimes we see that, we assume it's every symptom, but it might only be one. It might only be one or two. Okay, so just to recap that, we have the 10 warning signs that are used as a guide to see if there might have been a change, an Alzheimer's related change. People may have one or they may have many. And if you see those signs, you do want to talk to a doctor. So let's move on and talk about early detection. So, let me skip on one more there. All right, so sometimes the person with dementia is the one to say, "Hey, something isn't right. I'm not sure what's going on with me." You know, often it's the family. It's the family or the friends who are noticing something first and bringing it to the doctor's attention. And that can be a difficult thing to get that person to the doctor if they're not recognizing those symptoms, or if they're in denial of those symptoms. And sometimes just the embarrassment or the fear over Alzheimer's disease, which is a very feared disease and, you know, word to hear, can make someone not want to go. And yet going is the most important thing you could do. So we'll hear a little bit about early detection here.
You know, it's a very interesting phenomenon that people who have memory problems are often less aware of it than family members or their friends who know them well. One of the reasons for that is our ability to monitor ourselves, which is an important part of brain function, decreases when we start having memory problems. Not in everybody, but commonly, and more than half the people with memory problems. And so the person is just not keeping track of the trouble they're having day to day. But the family members are, you know, paying attention. If they're paying attention, they see, boy, this is starting to happen a lot, and the person's not aware of it. So the family's more aware, and they may talk to their loved one about it, and they say, you know, I've noticed you've been repeating yourself. And they say, I'm not repeating myself. And that could either be due to the fact that they're not aware of it, or they may not want to acknowledge it.
That's a painful thing to acknowledge in any of us.
I was so adamant about what was happening to Daryl. I wasn't sure. I didn't know. And this wasn't the person that I know. This wasn't the person. Daryl was my husband was very, he always had to be building or designing or working with his hands. And it was getting to the point where he wasn't, and he was becoming very frustrated when he was forgetting to do things or go places.
Okay. So because you know, the family and friends may notice these changes in someone that you love, what should you do? And the association has created kind of a roadmap for you to follow to know how do you handle this once you see something different going on that you're concerned about. So this roadmap is sort of like the 10 warning signs roadmap, but you're first going, let me just click on the first box here. You're first going to look at what are the specific changes in behavior, thinking, memory. What are those specific examples? And we strongly recommend you write all these things down and then take them to that doctor's appointment, because once you get there, you often are not going to remember the level of detail that might be helpful to them in assessing the situation and deciding what is really going on. So the next step, is there anything else going on? Was there a change in medication? Was there, did someone move? Did someone pass away that was close to them and that changed their experience of life? There might be some other trigger that was going on in somebody's life that would have impacted their memory or their behavior or their mood and things like that. The third one is we want to learn about the signs and the benefits of early diagnosis. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing here specifically today. Then you want to check in with others. And it's not always the obvious daughters like the Garcias. It might be the mailman. It might be if someone lives in a, say like a senior development, it might be a neighbor. It might be the building manager. It might be the librarian. You know, it might be someone who comes in regular contact. Sometimes it's the bank for people who go to the bank a lot as a regular part of their life. Bank tellers often notice changes in people. So finding those people who have some interaction, have they observed anything? That can be a piece of this puzzle as well. And then having that conversation, which is very difficult conversation to have. No one wants to have it, but we want to pick a time of day. We want to pick a certain setting that is most comfortable. If someone is a morning person, don't do it at 5 o'clock in the evening. Have that conversation when it can be relaxed and easy, and pick the people in the conversation to have the conversation who they might be most likely to be able to listen to and not find threatening in some way. Sometimes it's not the spouse or the partner. Sometimes that's the person who catches the most conflict from them. It might be a close friend. It might be a rabbi or a minister. It might be a brother or sister. It might not be the obvious closest person because they may have difficulty hearing that. Already covered this. Who should be there? And what's the best time and place? I jumped the gun on this one. And what will you say? What will you or the person say? You want to get that together before the conversation happens and be clear about, we've noticed this and we wanted to know what you think about that. You're not accusing, we're not diagnosing, we're just saying, gosh, I noticed these changes and I was concerned and thought maybe we could talk about it. And then we want to just listen to what they have to say. Offer to go with to the doctor. Having that second set of ears and eyes can be helpful whenever we go to the doctor, but certainly in this situation as well. If it doesn't pan out, if they say no way and they stomp out of the room, don't give up. Don't give up, because there might be a different day, a different time, a different person to talk to them. We want to keep trying, because those symptoms are likely not going to just go away by themselves. They're going to need to be addressed as they get worse over time. And then we want to reach out for support so that we can get help in doing that if we need to. The association, by the way, we have a 24-hour helpline. We offer one-on-one care consultations. We meet with families on the phone, on Zoom, in person, to talk about their situation and answer any questions they have and guide them toward the right resources that might be useful to them. But seeing a doctor is the next step when you see these warning signs. So most people start with their primary care physician, but not all primary care physicians are as familiar with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So you'll see a list here of specialists that include geriatricians, neurologists, neuropsychologists, psychiatrists, and psychologists. So that's quite a list, and most people don't see all of those. There are geriatric assessment programs like Montefiore's Center for the Aging Brain in Yonkers is probably the closest geriatric assessment program. And they have a team of all of those on one team. And you do a 2-part assessment and you get to meet with everybody and they do testing and things like that. But typically, someone is sent from their primary care physician to either a neurologist or a geriatrician. And then they're assessed for memory and mood problems and things like that. Oops, what did I miss? No? Oh, there we go, sorry. Different box, okay. So we came up to see the doctor. Oh, I'm sorry. Having technical, there we go. Have to hit the, which corner is it? Oh my goodness. If technology limitations are a sign, I'm in trouble. I can tell you that. So why would we even go to have that diagnosis or to get that test?
In early detection of Alzheimer's. For one thing, a person is able to have a voice in what happens next. They can make plans. They can live life more on their own terms. They can also make plans for the future, financial plans, care plans. They can let people know what they want, which can be a real gift later on. It also allows time for families to make plans and to make decisions about who can do what and figure out care and those kinds of issues. Also, the treatments that are available for Alzheimer's don't cure Alzheimer's. They don't slow down the disease, but they do help with symptoms. And it seems as though they tend to work better the earlier a person is able to use those. So that can help too. Some people are interested in clinical trials. Clinical trials allow people to have access to treatments that aren't available yet. And for some people, that can be a really important thing to pursue.
On the table in the back, one of the brochures that I have is the Trial Match brochure, which is a matching program for free, where you can register online and share your symptoms, your diagnosis. You can be a healthy volunteer and still be in a clinical trial. I'm registered in Trial Match. I don't have Alzheimer's disease, but if a clinical trial comes up for someone my age with my family history, I'd love to be part of some study to, find out more information about why Alzheimer's disease happens. So that brochure is on the table if anybody is interested. So just a recap on the importance of early detection. We want to pay attention to those symptoms either in ourselves or in the people that we love. If we see changes, we want to have a talk with them. And you can always call the Alzheimer's Association for advice about how to have that conversation and what to do. You can use examples from the 10 warning signs as a guide in your conversation. I've seen this, and I'm concerned and wanted to talk to you about it. And it's important to know that early detection can be a great benefit as far as accessing treatments, accessing clinical trials, planning ahead financially and legally. There are always changes in our health insurance systems, and the earlier we plan, the better. And another good reason for this is that it's not always Alzheimer's disease, and when it's something else that is reversible, we would definitely want to know that. So let's talk now about seeking the diagnosis. This is the final section of our program. We have a little quiz here for you, testing our knowledge, keeping our brains active. There is currently, this is a true or false, there is currently no way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. Is that true or false?
That's false as a brain scan, isn't it?
There we go. So you are right, it is false. There are a number of assessments, and it's kind of a whole battery of tests and brain scan that determine whether someone can get that diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. So, the reason this question is in there is because sometimes people will say, what's the point, you can't diagnose it anyway? And then the second part of that could be, what's the point, there's no cure. And there isn't a cure for Alzheimer's at this point, although there are certainly great clinical trials going on about risk reduction as well as other treatments for this disease. So this is a list of all of the possible tests and assessments that might be done. Medical history, family history, history of like brain injury, traumatic brain injuries, for instance, as well as other diabetes, other things that could impact your health that could create symptoms of dementia, physical exam, screening for depression, because depression can cause symptoms of dementia. And once the depression is cured and treated, the symptoms of dementia may go away. And that's very important. And incidence of depression in older adults is higher, so it is an important thing to assess for. Interview with someone close, a family member, a friend. That interview gives so much information that the person may not be able to share themselves if they're experiencing it. Other tests are lab tests. They're looking for vitamin B12 deficiencies, possible infections. These are things that also can cause symptoms of dementia. Mental cognitive status tests, like the mini mental status exam, is going to assess various parts of your brain's functioning, like memory. They'll ask you who's the president, count backwards by 7 from 100, 93 and down. They'll ask you to count. It's assessing how your brain is functioning in different parts. And then brain imaging, which you mentioned. An MRI is a standard part of this. There's also a PET scan. There was a dye approved by the FDA a few years ago that can identify the plaques in the brain that are a hallmark symptom of Alzheimer's disease. So there are different brain imaging techniques that can be used for this. And then we're back to the Garcias. Do those symptoms always result in a diagnosis of Alzheimer's? This is a text again. One sister says, appointments have been going well, mom's handling them okay. Do you think it's really dementia? I guess we won't know until we get a diagnosis, but let's ask Dr. Salloway if it could be anything
Someone
else.
could have high blood pressure that's out of control, or they might have a thyroid condition that's not regulated, or diabetes that's not right, or on a medication that actually can cause memory loss. Drinking too much alcohol can make memory worse. So there are a lot of factors that go into cognitive difficulty with aging that some of them can be remedied. And so we want to do everything we can to improve cognitive ability and quality of life.
Okay, so just to recap, every person is different, and that experience of diagnosis will change from person to person. Something other than Alzheimer's could be causing those symptoms, and it's important to rule that out and to treat that if it's a curable illness. And then there's a negative stigma. There's a lot of fear about Alzheimer's disease. There are other just wrong beliefs that we might have, things we've heard about Alzheimer's, and that can prevent some people from getting a diagnosis. So we want to really encourage people to follow through and talk to your doctor about it. And then finally, we'll wrap up with the Garcias. They called, I called, but I got your voicemail. How did it go? So Mary got her evaluation. I'll call you later when I get home, but the diagnosis is early stage Alzheimer's. Oh no, what do we do? The doctor said the Alzheimer's Association offers free resources and some help people live well with the disease. I'll call soon, but I left the office with some hope. So it's a wonderful doctor that leaves you with some resources to help out, because sometimes we get calls from people who say, I got a prescription for Aricept and was told to make plans for the future. And I've heard that more times than I could possibly count. And we don't even know what that means sometimes. What does that mean? And so I do want to encourage you. We have our 24-hour helpline that I mentioned. We have those variety of education programs. We have local care consultations and education programs. We help people figure out what to do next. And we have lists of resources of home care agencies and other resources in the community, and other agencies like Jewish Family Services and other agencies that can help. We also do work a lot with people on how to cope with these symptoms. And we have over 30 support groups a month in our chapter for caregivers to talk with other caregivers and just, hear what it's like and how they can support each other. We also have early stage support groups. So for somebody who's in the early stage of Alzheimer's, who wants to meet others going through the same thing and talk about it, we have those kind of groups as well. So we have just a wide variety to really help people figure out what to do next. And so, so that concludes the program. Thank you.